Love in the Shadows. Chapter 1. It was a typical winter night when Julia first laid her eyes on him. The dimly lit bar was filled with the sound of chatter and the clinking of glasses. She was sitting alone at a table, sipping her wine when he walked in. He was tall, dark, and handsome. His piercing blue eyes were what caught her attention. She couldn't take her eyes off him. He sat at the bar, ordered a drink, and then turned to look at her. Their eyes met, and she felt her heart skip a beat. As the night progressed, they found themselves talking and laughing like old friends. She learned that his name was Eric, and he was a detective. He had a mysterious aura around him, and Julia couldn't help but feel drawn to him. They exchanged numbers and promised to see each other again. Chapter 2. Their second date was at a small Italian restaurant. They talked about everything from their childhood memories to their dreams for the future. As they walked out of the restaurant, Eric took Julia's hand and led her to a nearby park. It was snowing and the park was deserted. They stood under a tree and Eric kissed her. It was a magical moment, and Julia felt like she was in a fairy tale. Days turned into weeks and their relationship blossomed. Julia fell deeply in love with Eric, but there was always a shadow lurking in the background. Eric would disappear for days, sometimes even weeks. He would always have a vague excuse, and Julia couldn't help but wonder what he was hiding. Chapter 3. One day, Julia's curiosity got the better of her. She decided to follow Eric when he left her apartment in the morning. She trailed him for a few blocks until he entered a run-down building. She watched him disappear into the building and her heart started to race. What was he doing in there? Was he in danger? Julia decided to investigate further. She waited outside the building, and after a few hours, she saw Eric exit. He looked shaken and disturbed. Julia confronted him, and after a lot of hesitation, Eric finally confessed. Eric was investigating a case that involved a notorious drug lord. He had been working undercover for months and had to keep his distance from Julia for her safety. He had wanted to tell her earlier, but he couldn't put her in danger. Chapter 4. Julia was shocked, but relieved. She had always suspected that Eric was hiding something, but she never imagined it was this. Eric promised to keep her safe and continue to investigate the case. Julia decided to stand by him and support him in any way she could. Days turned into months, and the case dragged on. Julia would often worry about Eric's safety, but he would always assure her that he was fine. One day, Eric called Julia to meet him at a deserted warehouse. He said he had a surprise for her. As Julia entered the warehouse, she saw Eric standing there with a small box in his hand. He got down on one knee and asked her to marry him. Julia was overjoyed, and tears streamed down her face. She said yes. Chapter 5. As they left the warehouse, they heard a gunshot. Eric's face turned white, and he told Julia to run. Julia ran as fast as she could, but she knew Eric wasn't behind her. She turned back to see Eric lying on the ground, bleeding. She rushed to his side, but it was too late. Eric was gone. Julia was devastated. She couldn't believe that the love of her life was gone. She found solace in the fact that Eric had died protecting her. She knew that he had loved her deeply, and she would always cherish the memories they had shared.